All right. Ready to rethink how we think about risk.
Always up for that.
We're diving into Nassim Nicholas Taleb's The Black Swan today. You guys gave us quite the reading list this time.
Yeah, someone's serious about understanding the unpredictable. Excerpts from the book itself, plus a stack of academic papers. Buckle up.
This is going to be good. But The Black Swan, it's not just some theoretical thing, right?
No way. This goes right to the core of how we view risk and reward, and I'd even say how we explain to ourselves why things happen. The stories we tell ourselves.
Okay, so let's start with the heart of it, that Black Swan event.
Right, those massive, out-of-nowhere events, nobody sees them coming, but then suddenly, bam, world's rocked.
Exactly. It's like that example Taleb uses, that turkey just living his best life, then boom, Thanksgiving, throws your whole worldview out the window.
Exactly. The future's not always what we think it'll be. Like, we tend to think it'll just look like the past, you know?
Right, like that's the only way things could ever be.
But that's the problem with that kind of thinking. Induction. We rely on this historical data, but what happens when something comes along that just rewrites the rules? That data won't help you then.
So are you saying we should just become hermits? Give up on planning for the future entirely?
No, not at all. It's not that planning is pointless.
Yeah.
It's more like, be careful with predictions, especially in areas where black swan events are more likely to happen.
Okay, yeah, because some areas are definitely more prone to those massive swings than others.
For sure.
And that's where mediocristan versus extremistan comes in.
Exactly.
So mediocristan, that's like the land of the predictable.
Exactly. Everything kind of averages out. Take height, for example. You're not going to find someone 100 feet tall.
Right. There are limits.
But extremistan, that's where the wild things are. Extreme events. They're not just possible, they're practically expected.
So, like, what's a real-world extremistan scenario? Give me an example.
Okay, think about someone working a corporate job. Pretty predictable, right? Mediocristan. Now, picture that social media influencer, one viral video, and boom, massive fortune.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's a good one.
Extremistan in action.
So knowing which world you're playing in, that's got to be crucial. But how do we even wrap our heads around making decisions when these massive, unpredictable events can just happen?
Yeah. Well, that's where this fourth quadrant thing comes in. It's a really interesting concept that Taleb introduces.
Okay, fourth quadrant. I'm listening. Lay it on me.
So it's kind of like a map for when black swans are just part of the deal. You got to think about, how likely is something to happen, but also how huge would the impact be if it did?
So it's not just about the odds, it's about the potential consequences too.
Exactly.
Makes sense, especially with those events, the ones that don't happen often but hit hard when they do.
Exactly. And that's where a lot of times traditional risk management, it kind of falls apart. Like, it doesn't really account for, or it underestimates the impact that one of those black swan events could have.
So what do we do? Just like resign ourselves to a life of paranoia, knowing these things could just pop up?
No, not really.
Yeah.
See, Taleb's point is, we can't predict these black swans, but we can prepare
Okay, how so?
by making ourselves more robust, like acknowledging our limitations, but then building systems that can actually withstand those shocks,
So less about seeing the future, more about having those shock absorbers built in.
Exactly. Think of it like designing a building for earthquakes. You don't know when it's going to hit, but you reinforce the structure just in case.
Right. Prepare for the tremors.
That's it. Taleb calls it robustification, basically making these systems that can handle the unexpected.
So how do we actually robustify our lives then? Where do we even start?
Well, for one thing, we got to shift our mindsets. It's not just about optimization.
Interested?
It's about redundancy.
Okay, so not putting all our eggs in one basket.
That's the idea. Like backup plans, safety nets, maybe having that extra cash cushion instead of going all in on one investment,
Yeah.
might seem less efficient, but it actually makes you way more resilient. You're ready for those just-in-case situations.
Right, and this applies to things beyond finances.
Right.
Like your career, for example.
Exactly. Like, think about diversifying your skills.
Yeah.
Instead of going super, super niche, the more adaptable you are, the better you'll handle those unexpected curveballs life throws, which, happens.
Yeah, big time. The only constant is change, right? And speaking of change, didn't Taleb also kind of flip the script on how we view success?
Oh, absolutely. He talks about how we often overestimate the role of skill in success,
Yeah.
and we underestimate the role of just plain luck.
Interesting. Especially when it comes to those folks who've had, like, wild success.
Right. He talks about the Matthew effect.
Fill me in. What's that?
Basically, it's this idea that small advantages can snowball over time, leading to this huge success.
Oh, right. It's that the rich get richer idea, but with like a deeper layer.
Right, right. It's not just about talent or hard work. Sometimes
Mm.
it's honestly just being in the right place at the right time.
So are you saying that someone who's super successful,
Yeah.
they're not necessarily better, just luckier?
They might have gotten that lucky break,
Okay.
and it just kind of snowballed.
Wow.
And Taleb's point is realizing that should make us all a little more humble, not just about our successes, but also about other people's success too.
Yeah, good point. We love a good success story, but the behind the scenes is probably a lot messier than we think.
Mhm.
So how do we take all this in that we can't predict everything, that luck plays a part, but still, go after our goals?
Well, it's not about just giving up and saying, okay, whatever happens, happens.
Right.
Taleb would say that understanding the role of randomness, it shouldn't paralyze us. It should actually free us. Like now we can embrace the uncertainty, be open to those unexpected opportunities that pop up.
So be prepared, but also ready for those detours.
Exactly. Because you never know. Those detours, those black swans, they might lead to something even better than you planned.
I love that. So we've talked about like redundancy, right?
Yeah.
Diversifying our skills, accepting that luck's a part of it all. What else? What other strategies does Taleb suggest for, navigating these black swans?
One that's really interesting is we call barbell strategies. So it's this mix of like extreme risk aversion and extreme risk taking.
Whoa, okay, that sounds kind of wild. Tell me more.
So basically, you put most of your resources, let's say investments, into super safe conservative stuff, government bonds, that kind of thing.
Okay, so playing it safe with most of it. Got it.
Exactly. But then you take a small chunk and put it into really high risk, high reward things.
So you're dipping your toes into the volatile stuff, but with a safety net.
Precisely. Like imagine you have a stable job, but you're also working on your passion project on the side.
Gotcha.
Even if most of those risky things fail, one big win, it can make up for all of it. You're kind of acknowledging that both extreme success and extreme failure are possible, but you're positioned to benefit either way.
Interesting. So are you saying it's about hedging against that unpredictability we talked about, those black swans?
Exactly. Minimizing the chance of a huge loss, but still being open to those outlier wins. It's a balance, right? Prudence, but also a willingness to take calculated risks.
This is making a lot of sense, but
Cool.
it kind of brings up another question. If we can't always predict these black swans, how do we even know when to play it safe and when to take those risks? How do we separate meaningful stuff from all the noise?
That's the million-dollar question, right? Taleb says we're just bombarded with information these days, but most of it, it's just noise.
Yeah, true.
We got to get at filtering that out, focusing on the stuff that really matters.
So less time on the 24-hour news cycle, more time thinking critically.
That's it, being picky about the information you let in, learning the difference between what's valuable and what's just noise.
It's not just about understanding these black swans. It's about navigating the information around them, too.
Exactly. Have that healthy skepticism, especially when people try to fit things into these neat narratives and make big predictions.
Which happens all the time.
Right. Especially when it comes to these complex systems where, let's be honest, black swan events are practically guaranteed. Be wary of anyone who says they have it all figured out.
Yeah, it's like everyone wants to simplify things, but with something like this, you can't. It's too complex.
Exactly. And one way we can fight against that is by embracing what Taleb calls tinkering. Experimenting. Yeah. Trying things out, seeing what happens, and then learning from your mistakes.
So instead of freaking out about making a mistake, we should see it as a chance to learn and grow.
Exactly. It's about being more hands-on with decisions, not just stuck on theory. Test things out, see what happens, adjust as you go.
It's like that whole scientific method thing, but applied to life, right? Except instead of trying to control everything, we accept that sometimes those unexpected outcomes are the most important.
Exactly. And that leads us to one of Taleb's most interesting ideas, anti-fragility.
Oh, yeah, we touched on that earlier.
Right.
But it's so interesting, it's worth digging a little deeper.
For sure.
Remind me, what does it mean to be anti-fragile?
So it's not just about things withstanding shocks. It's about them actually benefiting from those shocks. Things that get stronger when things get tough.
Okay, so not just weathering the storm, but like using the storm to power up.
Exactly. Think about your body, right? You lift weights, you run.
Yeah, you're sore afterwards for sure.
Right, you get those little micro tears in your muscles.
Yeah.
But they rebuild stronger. That's anti-fragility in action.
That's a good point. So we're not just talking about like bouncing back, we're talking about leveling up.
Yes.
Okay, that makes sense. But how do we actually use that in other parts of life? It seems like a very like athlete mindset thing.
Well, the principles are the same. Think about, say, your job, having multiple income streams instead of relying on just one, that kind of thing.
So diversifying, like we talked about before, not putting all your eggs in one basket.
Exactly. It's about spreading the risk. Or, say, in a business, building in that flexibility so you can adapt when the market changes. That's anti-fragility, too.
So in a way, it's almost like inviting a little bit of chaos, but like on purpose, knowing it could make things stronger in the end.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. It's about accepting that randomness, that uncertainty. Those things are going to happen. But if we approach them the right way, they can actually help us.
That is a serious mind shift. We're so used to wanting to control everything, eliminate risk. But Taleb's saying sometimes you got to lean into it in a smart way to really become resilient, to grow.
Exactly. And it's not just for us as individuals. It's for, like, organizations, even societies.
Yeah.
Think about a system that lets people try things, make mistakes, learn as they go. Way more anti-fragile than a system that's super rigid, where there's no room for that.
So a little controlled chaos is good. Got it. It's all about finding that balance, right?
Exactly. Order and disorder. That's where the interesting stuff happens, where innovation can happen.
Well, we've covered a lot today. Unpredictable events, those black swan things, redundancy, anti-fragility.
It's a lot to think about.
It is. If there was one big takeaway from the black swan, something you really want our listener to remember, what would it be?
I think it'd be this. Don't be afraid of the things you can't control.
Easier said than done sometimes.
It is, it is. But instead of being afraid, try to be curious. Be open to those possibilities, because you never know what you might discover.
Because as Taleb says, those unexpected turns, those are the ones that can change everything.
For sure.
Wow, this deep dive into the black swan has been amazing. I feel like we didn't just scratch the surface. We really got into it today.
Yeah, we did. We went beyond just summarizing, didn't we? It's like we actually had to think about how to use these ideas,
Yeah,
which is what matters.
exactly. And hopefully this is just the start for our listeners. This is one of those books that once you read it,
Yeah.
kind of changes how you see the world.
It stays with you.
Yeah.
It makes you ask questions, challenge what you thought you knew.
And that's what we're all about here, right?
Absolutely.
So on that note, we'll leave our listener with this. What areas of your life could use a little of that anti-fragility? What can you do today to be a little more ready for those curveballs, those black swan events?
Until next time, remember, it's the people who can adapt, who can roll with the punches, who really thrive. So get ready for anything.